Okay, great. So thank you for joining us. This conversation is going to be about feedstock. So quick introduction about myself, and then I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves. Can you hear me there? Do I need to get closer? Yes, perfect. I'm Susana Medina. I've been 15 years in the industry of energy, in the last 5 years in the energy transition. Over the last year, I've been working with an investment group focused on green fuels. And it's my pleasure to drive this discussion today about feedstock. So in the panel, they will introduce themselves. I will ask the first question, and then I will ask when you respond, please start with an introduction by yourself. Do please say your name, your role, the company, but most important, which type of SAF you're producing, in which region. You will be really pleased to see that we actually have two representatives of two producers of HEFA SAF with different type of feedstock, two technology providers that use biomass as a feedstock, and we also have a biomass provider. So it's going to be a very diverse set of views about different topics. So let's get started. As you know, there's the app for you to please throw questions, and I will try to include them as they come. So we've been talking about bankability, and one of them is feedstock contracts, long-term feedstock contracts. So the question for the panel, and I'm going to start with the HEFA producers. Mihir, you will start first. The question is, how do you secure, what's your strategy to get the right feedstock, the right quality, the right volume, minimum prices? If you can start with that.
Sure. So we are a producer of HEFA-based SAF from DCO. We took a very different type of approach. We organized ourselves with Phillips 66.
Do you want to say your name and your company and your role?
Yeah, I'm Mihir, CEO of XCF Global. We are a holdco. The holdco has DevCo assets. The main DevCo asset is a 38 million gallon per annum facility that is productional today. We started production about 3 months ago and are slowly ramping up month on month. So super excited to be productional today. Really big deal considering what's happening in the industry. And for feedstock in particular, we took the approach that we wanted consistency before we move towards pricing. And on the consistency metric, we have a relationship with Phillips 66. It's a 15-year feedstock relationship and offtake. So that will be our starting point, which is a great starting point in the industry. As we kind of move through making sure that we're making good business decisions, that we're ramping up steadily, we'll start figuring out how to get better price feedstocks, mass balance, move ourselves away from a DCO type of product into something that's a little bit more sustainable.
Great. And your feedstock is all local?
It's all local. We're really embracing the 45Z strategy, which is to take in local feedstock, produce it locally, and deliver local.
Great. Let's move on to another HEFA producer, David.
Thank you. My name is David Arinze. I work with Shaphargroup. Shaphargroup is a China-based refiner of used cooking oil and waste products. And also, we transited to refining HEFA SAF as well. We have a capacity of 350,000 metric tons of HEFA SAF. And for our feedstock, we have 200,000 metric ton refiner for used cooking oil. And it ranges from, all waste product, not just used cooking oil itself, but fat and oil and other waste as well. So that's what we do.
Great, thank you. Let's move to biomass now. We have two technology providers that use biomass as a feedstock, and they're also developing their own projects. Kennedy, do you want to start?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So some of you know me already. Kennedy Ricci, I'm the president of 4Air. So we're actually from the business aviation space, but we've been investing into SAF projects. So bringing a little bit of a unique perspective as an investor and kind of a project today. One of the investments we made is a company called Alda Renewables, and it's a technology to upgrade pyrolysis oil for co-processing into FCC or hydrotreating units in a traditional refinery today. So we can take a advanced biofuel, a woody waste, and upgrade that into something that we can co-process, meet the Refuel EU sub-mandates or RED 3 sub-mandates for advanced biofuels, or qualify for some of the incentives in the US that are geared towards those biofuels. One of the first projects, so one of the things we liked as an investor is that the focus has been about co-locating and developing those projects with feedstock producers. So the importance of your feedstock quality, of how you're going to transport that, at what stage you transport it, has been critical, I think, to the project rollout. So the team's actually been able to announce their first kind of demo facility in Canada. That's where they are kind of promoting that right now. So doing that in partnership with a sawmill, with a wood waste provider, has allowed us to really optimize what that supply chain looks like, develop quality tests that are geared towards that specific product, and harmonize essentially that we're developing this project together. So they are, our feedstock supplier is our project partner on it. So I think that's been a little bit more unique and kind of embed approach to do it, but one that we've liked as an investor.
Very good. Now moving to Europe and biomass, Marcella.
Thank you, Susana. So my name is Marcella Franchi. I'm head of SAF for Haffner Energy. Haffner Energy is an expert at transforming biomass into energy at large. We've been around for 30 years, but we've only been looking at SAF for the last 2 years. So our expertise is to transform any type of residual biomass into a syngas, which in particular hydrogen-rich syngas. That syngas can then be transformed into SAF via a number of pathways. So very interesting to be in a biomass panel, very relevant to us. And you mentioned, Susana, how can we reduce the cost of feedstock for projects. The strength of Haffner Energy is really to be biomass agnostic. So, for instance, we have a project in France, and typically we do not do project. We provide the technology for projects. But in this case, we're actually leading the project. And what we've done is to use a panoply of biomasses in order to secure that the feedstock is available any time of the year. We're also using different feedstock, seasonal feedstock across the year.
Yeah. So we were talking with the group before this break. One of the questions is going to be exactly, right? How do we make sure feedstock costs reduce on time to try to reduce the difference between the cost of SAF and jet fuel? So, Marcella, thank you for that. Should we hear from the HEFA producers? What's the strategy to keep reducing the cost of feedstock for the next years?
Yeah, for us, we started from ground up. We focus a lot on the feedstock and the collections. So what we started doing was to collect feedstock from all over China. We focused in northern China, and so through the restaurant, hot pots, and all that. And so we do collections. After collections, then of course we begin to degum and refine. And we found that of course there's the feedstock is not finite, right? So what should we do further? We have to start. We invested a lot in R&D, trying to find other ways to produce all the kinds of feedstock, all the kinds of waste. China has the capacity to produce about 10 million metric tons of feedstocks, use cooking oil directly. But there are other ways, fat and oil. There are a lot of other ones that are cheaper as well. And we have done so well that we reduce our cost hugely right now. So which also affect, if you look at maybe not to go ahead in your questions, but if you look at, there are different prices of SAF right now. There is a lower angle and there is a high angle. So we are among those on the lower angle because of our feedstock are more cheaper than others. Yeah.
Thank you. Mihir, how do you see that in the US?
Yeah, I think the U.S. is a tiny bit different. I think UCO is a little bit less readily available. I think to answer your question in particular, HEFA is not going to be the pathway that's going to get you to Jet A parity. And I think if we want to achieve Jet A parity, that requires a lot of investment, and it requires upstream and downstream investment. So we have to invest into cheaper feedstocks. That means it has to be a waste in order to really draw down on cost. But that waste usually requires really high technological costs. And that high technological cost is the cost that we need to invest in and to bring that down. And then we have to, currently there's just a lack of, I strongly believe there's lack of capital in the space that needs to start coming in. We're experiencing it as a producer, but as that capital starts to come in, you draw down on the cost of capital. So together, I use this analogy, maybe not the greatest analogy, but TVs way back when the flat screen TV was really expensive. And eventually you can get an 83-inch flat screen TV for $1,500. But in order to get there, you have to invest into upstream and downstream businesses for us to get there. So we're not there yet. HEFA is not going to be the pathway, not yet, unless there's some type of waste product that you can use into HEFA. But it has to progress this way. And I think the building block of that is having product HEFA-based that you could draw down on cost. Probably UCO, you guys are doing a great job. So that's the starting point.
Great. Now, taking your point about investing on the upstream side, so there's enough volume. But we'd love to hear your perspective as a biomass provider. So 2 questions. One is, what are the requirements that you're hearing from the producers, like our panelists here, in terms of to secure the long-term contracts at the right quantity and quality? If you can comment a lot about that. But also, what are you guys thinking of, how are you going to invest? What's your plan to scale up production to get to the levels that we're going to need?
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vaughan Bassett. I'm the Senior Vice President for Drax on the sustainable biomass side. So Drax has many components. They have a FlexGen portfolio, they have a biomass generation portfolio, they have a carbon dioxide removals business, and they have what we call sustainable biomass. That's me. Within the sustainable biomass, we primarily manufacture wood pellets in Canada and the USA, and we ship those to destinations pretty much around the world, including to ourselves here in the UK as Drax. So it means that Drax is the largest integrated wood pellet player in the world. So globally, we're number 1 in that department. So I think we know a thing or two about wood pellets by now, and that's the interest that I have in this conference and in talking to people here who are thinking about creating SAF from the pathway of biomass. And I'm going to get to your questions in a second here, I think. But I think I just wanted to reflect a little bit on, how we view the cost of the biomass, the wood pellets. And the 2 principal costs for us are fiber, which is the basic input, and logistics, which could easily be up to sort of 30% of the cost stack. So by keeping a tight control on those 2 parameters, that's the way we see ourselves moving forward successfully and being long-term players in this industry, the power generation industry, or any other industry that requires biomass. And it's important because not only in power generation, but in conversations we've had with potential SAF developers, one thing they do want is long-term supply of considerable volumes of biomass, in our case, wood pellets. And that's a constant theme, and we embrace that, we support that. We are not an organization that has, ready-made capacity ready to sell. So just like you or just like our SAF end users would be experiencing the need for offtake to bank projects and get them out of the ground, we would need offtake of the wood pellets to build additional capacity around the world, probably in North America, which is where we are. We already have 17 such facilities over there, and we have a whole pipeline of potential facilities in various stages of development and or readiness that could be brought into production over a fairly short time, certainly a shorter time than it would take any large customer in the SAF world to develop their own project, right? So there's that. We also feel that biomass, sustainable biomass, is a rather valuable commodity going forward in years, and probably too valuable to be burned up in power stations, frankly, where a lot of it is today. And I can see a future world where biomass that is currently going into those end users could be successfully diverted to SAF without really the need for building additional capacity out there. So hopefully that answers those two questions enough that I can put this down here.
No, thank you. Any comments from any of you guys in terms of bankability, requirements or challenges that you have to secure long-term contracts so that your project can be bankable?
I think I want to emphasize something that Vaughn said there. I think there's kind of two aspects. One, the whole idea of the feedstocks that we're using is that we can provide a better end-use value for that product than what they would be already. Otherwise, you wouldn't make SAF. It'd be more valuable to keep the UCO as waste oils. So the whole idea is that we're able to provide an option for this feedstock, for whether waste in whatever form, to be more valuable. So if we can take some of the integrated approach, I think that Mihir was talking about, where you are integrating this upstream supply chain and everybody is participating in the value appreciation of what that end use is for the feedstock, I think that's where at least we've seen more success in projects, and that ability to essentially share the upside, I guess, of the more valuable end product has seemed to be more successful, I think, in project development overall.
Thank you. I have two questions about availability, and we'll move to questions from the group. One is about used cooking oil for you, David. China, you touched a little bit at this about the beginning, but we know that in Europe we import 40% of what we need from China, but at the same time, China is expanding the production capacity. We're going to need more. Is there going to be enough? What's your view? You're on the ground. You know the market.
Yeah, so if we look at it, we look at the local refineries, the local SAF refineries now. There is about 800,000 metric tons coming on stream by the end of the year to fourth quarter of next year. And, one of our facility was built within 1 year. So that's a 300 metric thousand capacity built within 1 year in China. And that wouldn't think about that here in Europe. And this is happening, huge investment, it's going on. But that's why we are thinking from the other part of it. That's why our first investment was in refining of used cooking oil. Because without the feedstock, that becomes an issue, because there won't be SAF without the feedstock. So then you look at different kinds of feedstock. You look at how cheap they are. Then I think that also remember that it's not only Haffner that needs our feedstock. There is other competitors, or to HVO. There is the Puma and all that, right? Biodiesel. Our first customers, we still supply biodiesel plants in Europe till date. So we did about 20%. Just remain that. So we'll just keep that supply going. But right now, we know that the price increased for I think last week there are 2 price increases. You look at the shipping cost that just increased 3 days ago, and also you look at the feedstock itself. So most plants are in China are on trial phase. Some of them are on trial phase. So 80% of our goods are already going there. Of course, our own production and also other customers' production. So it's already cut. We used to supply 100% to Europe. Now it's just 20. So now we think about generally, what are we going to do to make sure that we keep the supply going, of course, with other partners as well. So that's why we think a lot about development. How do we make it cheaper? How do we make it efficient? I mean, the feedstock. How do we change our collection mechanisms? How do we just look at the whole process? Because if we just focus only on heifer production, what we see is we wouldn't know when it creeps up that there is actually no feedstock. This morning before I left the room, I have one of the buyers in Europe was saying, hey, okay, we're interested to, can you ship for us, next week? I said, sorry, no, we can't, because your price is not good enough. So just to put it in perspective, FOB China for feedstock is about 8,000. FOB, okay? And the same price is what they're also buying here in Europe. Wow, so who are you gonna sell to? So you sell to China because, they just pick it up from the factory and deliver it. You have it's kind of X work. So that's what you go for. So yeah, I think there's gonna be, factories are trying to scale up. They're taking time, but we have 20,000 metric tons now. By this time next year, we're going to be doing about, we have for the feedstock, we have 240 metric tons per annum, and we're trying to push forward to about 350 to 400, and our collection to up to 1 million. And other investors are also doing the same, because without feedstock, there will actually not be heifer sap, and Europe needs this as well as other parts of the world. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's open the questions. I don't know if we have any questions online. Sorry, I'm reading them. Where do we take the second one for biomass? How can the biomass sector ensure its sourcing is 100% sustainable? It does not fell the world's most precious forest.
Well, I can...
Bond up. Marcella, do you want to start and then we pass it to Bond to complement?
Yeah, I think I can take that one. So, firstly, it would be commercial suicide for any company to believe that they can harvest proper growing trees and turn them into wood pellets and make money. That just doesn't happen. The wood that's used for wood pellets is by and large the waste component that comes out of sawmills, that comes out of the harvesting process, or it's trees that or logs, shall I say, that don't meet any sort of criteria that could be used for a higher purpose. And so the wood pellet sector is really the bottom feeder in this whole game, and needs to be in order to survive with pretty slender margins in the business. So there's an economic question there. And secondly, thanks mainly, I would say, to very skeptical and concerned biomass eyes here in Europe, we are susceptible to a very, very high level of sustainable certification. And every pellet virtually that comes into Europe every pellet that's going to go into, sustainable aviation end users is going to have to meet that very high certification standard. And, that too is something that, I think meets the test here. So there is a strong misconception in the world, actually, that, precious forests are harvested, destroyed to make products like wood pellets. That couldn't be further from the truth. It just doesn't stand a good economic test. And, for the most part, we're buying our raw materials, or at least the wood pellet industry is buying their raw materials from sawmillers and other primary users of the forest harvest.
Thank you. Marcella, you use feedstock. So is the certification regulation enough to achieve that?
I just wanted to add that in Europe we have mandates that are very specific about the biomass you can use. So not only does it need to ensure that it's not from raising forests, but on top of that, it needs to be residual biomass, biomass that has no other use. It can't be a food product, for instance. So it really is the leftover of the leftover. And not only that, but you have community pressure to ensure that that is the case and you're not taking an economic factor away from another player. I can give the case of our project in France, where we have to ensure that we are not competing with other local players in the use of that biomass. As an example, we're going to use straw because there is no need for straw locally, among other biomass. So it's a whole ecosystem that one should be very careful not to upset, because the volumes concerned are so high that they can actually upset an ecosystem.
Thank you. Should we go back to the list of questions? That's a good. There's one there about how does variation in feedstock prices. Did I just lose it? There was one about variation in feedstock prices. How does it impact the price of heifer? Mihir, do you want to take that one?
It's everything. I mean, it is your major cost of goods sold going into your input. So unless you've drawn down on technological costs or cost of capital, it is the most important cost going in.
How do you protect against that in the contracts that you sign?
So right now, we have a variable contract, but we're focused on ways where we're drawing down on that cost regularly. That is, now that 45Z basically states that domestic feedstock will qualify, we're really focused on producer level credits, how to sustain those credits, and what are all the investment that's necessary to basically drive down feedstock costs.
David, the same situation?
Yeah, you have to look at what happens when you get a poorly either poor collection of feedstock or is poorly refined. It affects the final product of SAF. So it's either you end up getting the average we're looking at is about 7.2. Okay, so if you get about 25% naphtha and get the other percent, and let's say just a waste of 2 or 3%, that's a very good number. But that now affects the price that you have on SAF. So it's important that the product itself, that we get real, very well-refined product and transfer that to the SAF refineries. And these refineries are able to refine with a lesser cost, because if they buy a lesser quality feedstock, so they consume more power. they use more resources to refine it. And if that happens, the price will go higher. So, but if they get a high quality feedstock, it just makes it much easier to refine. Yeah. And that drives the price down as well.
Marcella, I know you're keen, but I'm going to ask you one question before you answer. Remind me what percentage of the total cost when you produce from biomass is the feedstock?
Oh, it's over 50%.
Okay.
So it's a huge amount, and yes, it's got a huge influence in the final price. We've done a lot of sensitivity on that, but also we see in our projects a lot of type of feedstock and a lot of different prices. For instance, if you use landfill waste, that's got a cost of 0. Sometimes, in fact, garden waste's got a negative cost. But as you were mentioning before, it's also the cost of collecting that biomass and converting it into a suitable biomass. What we really try and do in the projects that we get involved is to have a variety of biomass to secure that there will always be biomass throughout the life of the project, not only the cheapest biomass, but the one that will be available in the future.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Let's go with the list. Well, there's one for you, David, there. What would you say were the biggest challenges in setting up the feedstock collection chain in China?
I think the landmass, the distance in collection. It just happens that there are restaurants almost in every street. A particular street, you can find 4 to 5 restaurants, hot pot restaurant and all that. But if you look at the landmass of just a particular area, it's quite huge. So you are also looking at how, so what we did was we started before we're just doing collection in hubs. So a car had to drive all the way from one restaurant to the other, and you now look at the end of the day, you look at the emission, so we're trying to reduce emissions, so are we now going to add more to it? So, but now we change that pattern. We use all that kind of collection. So the challenge is, one is infrastructure. 2, it's how people are able to adapt with Uber kind of collection. That is what we're using now. Then you now think about long-term contract you're going to have with this collectors and this restaurant. So it's a chain that is a bit difficult to manage, but we've been able to do it successfully. But there are still, I think someone was asking me earlier, is 10 million the limit, in China now? No, I think maybe 13 million. So, but setting up the infrastructure to do that is a big challenge in certain areas, especially areas that have large landmass. So, how do you transport from one section of the city to another, from one cluster to the other? I think that's a big challenge. People that are able to take care of that. There are some areas that we will never collect because it's difficult to do that. So just setting up the infrastructure, pickups. How do you pick up? What's distance between a ride to a pickup station and to a drop-off station? These are things that must be considered.
Thank you. We were also talking about that in the case of biomass, the reality of the US from Canada compared to Europe was different also in terms of the collection as we talk about the supply chain and again, reducing cost. Do you mind, Kenny, what's your experience in terms of the complexity of the collection and the supply chain of getting the feedstock in your project in Canada?
Well, I think, being able to focus, on that project with a supplier, the feedstock supplier that's already based there, has the supply, has the production of pyrolysis oil that we need to then upgrade, has made our lives a lot easier, actually, because we're able to basically plug into an existing supply chain that's there. I think we've seen some of the complexity out of the regulation side, though. I mean, just there's thankfully a lot of overlap when it comes to the advanced biofuel and waste woody biomass, but there's still details in there, I think, that make what your eligibility could be in Canada versus the U.S. different. And especially, I think, as we see, things evolve between the two countries, what can you do with imports between the two? And will you have to supply that into Canada, or do you have the option to bring that to the U.S.? So things like that will continue to evolve. Part of what we've tried to do is engage, that upstream kind of for project development, but also the downstream consumers, who will be actually taking the SAF. So within the company, we have investment from fuel distributors, airlines, us from the business aviation side. Most recently, Boeing has selected the Canada project for grant funding. So we've been able to engage people, really full supply chain from the end user to the feedstock supplier. And so I think that's pretty critical. That will help with that. Where can we actually put it? Where are we going to get it from? How are we going to develop it? What quality do we need? What pricing can we take? Having that full supply chain view has helped us a lot.
Thank you. We got a few seconds left, I think none. But Marcella, you want to comment the reality in Europe of collecting biomass and how do we simplify the supply chain?
So, as I mentioned before, we are into the residual biomass world, i.e. what's called second generation SAF, which is different from HEFA. The reality is that Europe is much more densely populated. So to make a project truly viable, it's better to have small-scale projects. I mean, we were comparing with David. The project that we're involved with in France is 60,000 tons of SAF per year. That's a lot smaller than what you see in America or Asia. But you can replicate easily those projects, and they're particularly appropriate for more agricultural areas. So that's the beauty of it. Sometimes regional airports are in those areas, and that's what we've picked for this project. Replicability and local usage of residual biomass is where we see the reality for Europe.
Very good. Well, our time is up. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thanks, everybody.